Today we are learning basketball with Dan Devine. You can find his work at Yahoo, formerly The Ringer, covering the NBA at large, bouncing around all these different teams, everything going on. Co-host the Big Number Pod with Tom Haberstroh. Got to check into that if you're not listening. But before we dive into all things NBA, how are you doing today, Dan?
I'm great, man. Thanks so much for having me, Ryan. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. Excited to just dive in today and hear a little bit about your work, your background, your perspective, and obviously hit on some of the interesting things around the NBA. I thought we could dive into some of your recent stories on, Jamal Murray looking like himself again finally, Giannis Antetokounmpo playing like an MVP, but maybe not quite getting the same amount of credit as he used to for this type of production. But before we dive into all that, I would love to hear about your perspective, your journey in basketball, and mostly just how you got to where you are today, and any advice to someone who hopes to, find themselves in a similar path working in basketball media, especially carving out a full-time career, which can be so challenging with all the moving factors nowadays.
Sure. Yeah. So the place I'll start is just to say that I don't know that my path is super replicable now, but I'll tell you what it was. So I started freelancing for Yahoo Sports in 2009, which is crazy. But at that point, there was the Yahoo Sports blogs. Like it was the blog era, and sort of a bunch of different companies had started up their own blogs, then were hiring up kind of independent talent and people who had been writing their own stuff or making their own shows, things like that. And I was super into the Basketball Jones. Now those guys are no dunks at the Athletic, but in between there, they were the starters. But back then, they were no dunks. Oh, they were the Basketball Jones rather. And it was J.E. Skeets and Tass Mellis making a show like in their condo. And I would listen to their podcast every day at my desk job at the newspaper I worked at. And I would read the stuff that people that they knew and talked about and who were in the comments of their podcast episodes every day. Were like, I was like, oh, I'll go read Matt Moore at Hardwood Paroxysm. I'll read Tom Ziller at Fan House. I'll read, Skeets was blogging at Deadspin at that point. And so I got to know some of these people through their work there. And I started writing an independent sports blog on my own and did that for a little bit, and then pitched Skeets an idea and said, like, he was editing at Ball Don't Lie at Yahoo Sports. He said, like, I have an idea. I'll write it for free. If you like it and you want to publish it, go for it. And if you don't, no sweat. But I want to figure out a way in. And so I wrote a story about, because I lived in Boston, and the Hall of Fame's in Springfield, Mass. And there was going to be an exhibit with, going along with Michael Jordan's induction into the Hall of Fame. So I went to go, like, I'll go write about that exhibit. Totally for free. Like, I will drive on my own. I will get my own ticket. I will not get a press pass. I will just go do it. I can in good conscience recommend to people that they work for no money. I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. In that moment, it was like, this feels like the best way for me to see if I can get in. And he was what I would later learn: when you are editing and running a blog, somebody says, hey, can I give you a story for free? Chances are you're going to say yeah, because you are just trying to get as much stuff up on the website as you can. Especially at that time, he was posting like 10 or 12 things a day. So one fewer thing that he had to write, he was very excited about. And, that worked out. That went well. He liked it. It ran. That led to, hey, would you want to do something else? We could use some book reviews. Would you want to do some book reviews? And I was like, no, like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then, like, eventually that was, get $25 a post. Turn that into a little bit more regular work. And then he left to go do the show full time, the Basketball Jones full time. Trey Kirby took over before he joined the show. Trey Kirby was like, yo, do you want to write more often? I was like, yeah, sure. He's like, oh, we'll see if we can get you $50 a post. I was like, all right, great. And then Trey went to go do the show. Kelly Dwyer took over, and he was like, yo, do you want to write even more? And so then that turned into like basically every day or every, a few things. And so then it just turned into regular freelancing. About 3 years of that, 2.5 years of that, I was just around the company at that point. I was just like somebody that was on the team, but not full time. They were looking to staff up. They asked me if I wanted to go from freelance to full time. And that was February of 2012. And I've been doing this full time in some capacity ever since. And so I was at Yahoo for 6 years. They're about 5.5 years full time. The Ringer made an offer. I went over there for a few years. Yahoo made an offer for me to come back. I went back. And so I've been extraordinarily lucky to be doing this full time for longer than I expected to get to. Most of the people that I started doing this with have changed jobs or changed careers. A lot of them don't still do this. A lot of them don't still write. A lot of them that do still write differently than they used to. I've been super duper fortunate to get to keep doing it. And that's how it worked for me. I mean, so again, like the idea of learn how or get to be friendly with the person that then gets hired at a national spot, pitch that guy something for free, get in there, hustle for 2.5 years, hope it turns into a job, and then hold on to that job for dear life for a decade and a half. Again, I don't know how replicable a path that is for everybody, but it is how it worked for me.
Hey, I mean, that's a super interesting path and journey. And from what I've learned doing these podcasts is that the path really is different for everyone. There doesn't seem a fully traditional path to break into basketball, whether it's covering it, working with it.
Sure.
Like everyone brings different perspective, different background, and different skills to the table. And, that, just shows like stands out to me for, the drive and work ethic to keep showing up. And, obviously not everyone can work for free, but if you can get away with putting good work out there with the right eyes in front of it, think and keep showing up, that sounds like it's one way to help get things done.
That was the biggest thing at the beginning, was like, show up and have an idea. Because the job that I worked at a community newspaper in Boston, a weekly newspaper, and I would have, in that capacity, I was more on the editorial side of things. Like I would work with freelancers. I'd have people coming to me, and I would have the relationship that I had with a lot of those writers. Some of them would say like, "Hey, I'm available if you need something," and that's awesome. But also like, it's so much cooler when you come to me and say like, "Here's what I want to do," because then it's not me looking for something to give to you. It's you coming with an idea and having something that we can see how it fits into the coverage plan and stuff. So when I was on the other side of that and I was trying to like pitch myself, or I was trying to make inroads with editors, or, put myself in position to get to do more things, it was like, okay, what can I pitch? What's something that I either not even necessarily something that I can do that no one else can do. Don't have the ego to think that like nobody else could replicate the work that I do, but what's an idea? What's something that they don't have on the website right now? What's something that they maybe don't cover regularly, or I don't know if they would have somebody that's like locally in position to do that. That's something that I can pitch. And that persists even through now. Like the discipline that I have, I think, to the extent that I like do anything besides just keep showing up, I try to be really like consistent week in, week out of what haven't we been writing about? What haven't, maybe other national shops like us aren't getting on yet. Is there something that's kind of moving in the direction of becoming a thing that we can, get into? My editor makes fun of me. He's like, "You've been pitching the Pistons at me for 3 months." I'm like, because we should have been early. But like it's what have we been writing about? And then what haven't we been writing about? So if we haven't been writing about Team X, Team Y, Team Z, style of play X, Y, and Z, this player, is doing something different that's interesting. And then like the beginning of every week, I'm pretty much like Monday morning, usually I'm coming up with like 5 or 6 things to show my editor and be like, here's kind of what I'm thinking. What would you be interested in? And then sometimes that's tied to, these guys got a national game Wednesday. This is going to be this big thing Friday. These guys are on TV, blah, blah, blah. Or, this player is going to be going back to where he used to be. And so there's like a hook there or something, or over the last 2 weeks, nobody has done more X than Team Y. So like, but it's that like, it is constantly like revisiting A, what our coverage has been, B, what other people might not be on top of yet. And then can we kind of marry that to a news peg, or can we marry that to something where there's going to be natural eyeballs on it? And it forces me to keep up, honestly. I mean, like, rather than just assuming, I know like, oh yeah, that like you can always write the superstars. You can always write the, glamour franchises, the public teams. But I remember when I started out being like, if I saw something that, one of these websites or one of these papers or one of these whatever covered that was like, oh, that's like my guy. I can't believe that they're writing about him. Like that felt like you got reached down and tapped on the shoulder. And I know that there's a ton of fan bases, especially non-marquee markets, non-glamour markets, that are like, they're noticing like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, and people appreciate that. People appreciate seeing the devotion that they give, the attention that they pay reflected in broader coverage. And so I try to be mindful of that. I set a goal every season of being able to write about every team at least once in some like significant capacity. I think I'm at like 28 or 29, so I still got a couple. I'm sorry, Hornets fans, I'll see if I can get there. Jazz fans, I'll see if I can get there before the end of the year.
I was
It's
just
you.
say the Wizards, the Jazz maybe are still
Yeah.
on the outside looking in.
I mean, and the tricks of the trade there is that you wind up pitching a column like, the most interesting thing about the 5 worst teams in the NBA. And then you get, like it's not exactly a full meal, but you get like a few hundred words about thing X, about whatever, Bilal Koulibaly's perimeter defense, whatever. I'll get there. I promise. I'll find my things. But that I say that not as a way to like, certainly no like disparagement of other people that in a similar gig to me, but like I think that if you don't start from the position of I'm supposed to be covering the league, not just the 10 most popular players and the 5 most popular teams, I'm trying to cover the league. If you're not doing that, I feel like you're maybe closing off your perspective in a way that doesn't necessarily serve you.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job to represent all the fans in the league, like you're saying, and so teams and cities don't get left out. Like I know, growing up a Magic fan, I would light up seeing anytime you see like a role player on the Magic who's playing well, like a Goga Batadze early this year,
Sure.
get like a whole feature column or a shout out from a national, publication, whether it's Yahoo or Orlando Sentinel back in the day, or even ESPN back in the day as well. But that I think you're doing the right type of mindset there to differentiate from, like you said, people that might only just kind of chase the popular trends of, the trade rumor of the day, or where's Jimmy Butler going to go this week after the trade demand over the last month. Like,
Yeah.
let's make another prediction that it still might be the Lakers or the Knicks or whatever. I mean, like you're really branching out into actually covering the league.
Well, and it's one of the things that makes it challenging when you're like, what's the way in, right? Because there's always like the reason that a lot of national shops and a lot, TV networks and whatever focus so like hyper specifically on those superstar names, those major teams, is like there is more interest in those things. But and this isn't an exact analogy, and it might not be as clear or clever as I want it to be, but like that's candy, and it is like it's tasty and it gives you a little rush and it's satisfying, but like enough of that and nothing else, and you rot your teeth and you start to get sick. You got to do the other stuff too. You have to eat your vegetables sometimes. And I'm not to compare, some teams to like Brussels sprouts or whatever, but also Brussels sprouts when roasted with a little bit of olive oil can be delicious. So like that's the job. The job is to be able to say like this stuff that is good for you, this stuff that is, or there is stuff over here. Maybe you wouldn't grab it, first off the shelf, but like take some time with this. This is good. And it's my job to be like, here's what's good about it. Here's what's interesting about it. Here's why you should know about it. And here's why it matters. And to contextualize it. Some days more successful than others, some topics more successful than others, but I feel like that's the job. And that's, because I am of the belief that like basketball, especially NBA basketball, is kind of like pizza, and that like even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. Like no matter what, there's something that's cool and something that's worth paying attention to and something to enjoy on every one of these teams. It's the job of people like me to find it and promote it and to tell you why you should care about it and maybe wake you up to something that you weren't paying attention to before or whatever. So again, like not always, I mean, there will always be time for me to, or I will always have the assignments occasionally of write about the famous thing, right? Like I say this, it's funny, before we got on, I filed a column and it was like, here's what has been going on with Jimmy in Golden State since, the trade. And like, but even within that, it's not just, okay, they're 8-2 since they got him and 8-1 games with him. It's like, well, why is it working? Okay, let's look at the ways he's going in isolation. Let's see how the role he plays defensively, that they can actually, like, why that has helped elevate things. The style that they're playing with, why is it cool that they go small? Like, try to get into the game of it more, and not just like, that guy has coffee and that guy's funny and he's with other famous guys and that's why we pay attention to it. Yes, and also he's that guy for a reason. Let's talk about how that all kind of works and like why it's working and why it's cool narratively that this is boosting up seemingly Stephen Curry, right? Like, you've invigorated this guy who does matter in this really big way, and it maybe gives another potential closing kick to something that maybe we thought we weren't going to see anymore. So like, it's the stats, it's the tape, it's the narrative. Like, I don't think that's a dirty word. I think we're in a storytelling business, and I think that some stories are pretty interesting to get into. So like, it's kind of all of it. And I think down that path is why I never hit a word count. It's because I'm always going over, because there's always something more to say.
There it is. And there's a lot to hit on there. I really like the analogy, and I actually can see how, to continue it, like covering Jimmy Butler on the Warriors is a little bit of both. You get like that sweet potato pie is what you're looking for, where you get the veggies in there, but actually there's a little candy going on here too. So you get to like, you end up at the fun point in the actual, league where you're covering the faces, but you're getting at, why. And I bet that was a super interesting article, because that was the player I pegged. Obviously I got a little 10-game sample of hindsight on my side now, but
Sure.
that was the player I thought was the only guy that could really save this Warriors season. Just the way it felt like they didn't have quite enough oomph to really like star power throw in your face when Steph wasn't feeling it, especially. And Jimmy just brings a different dynamic. Like, he's not the opposite player, but he's a big wing defender, gets downhill, draws fouls downhill, can really kind of be a polar opposite gravity wise type of force to what Steph brings. And just having that demeanor next to a Draymond, I'm sure just ups the mentality of like, there's no one as good as us. Like, I don't think there's a young team in the playoffs that wants to see the Warriors in the first round of a series, given that experience of basically like whatever the number is, like 8 of the last 10 finals have featured either the Warriors or Jimmy Butler in them. So like, no one wants to face that level of experience. But I really do like the analogy of like, it's up to the writer to kind of spice up these veggies and show me why I should actually like this meal, why I should be eating a little more of this and not just, the candy of the day, as you say, with all that. And I think that's a great perspective to have, to really dive into the basketball and be like, people that love basketball want to hear about the basketball, and the more of the candy stuff as you get at the general stuff is probably more for the common sports fan that isn't dying into what happened on the basketball court as much as I caught some highlights and I love these personalities, or I love these trade rumors going on. I'm just going to check in on the latest thing. And, I think there is room in the sports world for both. And I think both matter in terms of, the growth of the league. But I, I think the point is it shouldn't come as a disservice to the actual basketball fans to lift up all of like the emptiness or the rumors or the fun drama stuff that helps carry the social media trend of the league. Like, we can build a platform and live in a world that has both. And you can look at like even just NFL coverage and pretty much see that there can be a lot of hardcore analysis of the sport and still general popularity to the common fan about it.
I think that's right. And there are people who do a tremendous job of that, they don't necessarily have the same platform as something like NFL Live, right? But, there are people who are doing that for our league. And, Zach Lowe was certainly one of them at ESPN. And whenever and wherever we see and read and watch him again, I look forward to that, because he's, the best in the world for me. But like, the dunker spot guys, Nikias and Steve, like, there are people who get into the nitty gritty of it. The guys that are over at Sportscasting now, that sort of team of writers that do a great job of explicating the game out. I'm going to forget more names. And so please do not take it as a slight if I did not say your name as we go along here. But yeah, there are people who do wonderful work detailing what you're seeing, and not just like, so not just making it all about the bloviating, and not just making it all about like the arcane numbers that make it hard to understand the context, like putting it all together. It's not exactly the same thing, but one thing that I have had to like kind of make my peace with, first at the Ringer and then now at Yahoo as well, when you're talking about the draft or free agency or a big trade or whatever, insert thing here, tentpole thing here, fans and readers are just, they are going to click more on, they're going to dig into more something that is titled winners and losers. If you put winners and losers in the headline or the subject line or whatever, it is going to get more eyeballs on it. So when that was sort of explained to me, and I was like, I don't want to keep doing winners and losers for everything, man. Like this, it's a like, all right, but we're going to do it that way. Okay. So if we're going to do it that way, it's my job to make that interesting, right? If I'm going to get the eyeballs in, if just putting winners and losers of blank means people are going to click on it. Okay. When they click on it or when they listen to it, what do I want them to get? And like the most recent version of that I did was the Luka AD trade. And it was like, you don't need me to tell you that Luka's good. So let's talk about the specific way this relates to the half court offense in LA. Let's talk about the specific concerns I have about the half court defense in LA. Let's talk about the glass half full optimistic take of why you might do this if you're Dallas, from a team building construction, and the like, this was a team that made the finals based on elite defense and just good enough offense. Obviously that has not come to pass. And that maybe seems like they built the whole thing on like a burial ground with a witch underneath it or whatever. But, and then also like, yeah, all right, Lakers exceptionalism as a topic, as a story, as a narrative construct. Let's dig into that a little bit. Let's talk about these things and let's make some jokes along the way. And let's try to like figure out how to turn this kind of like staid, maybe constricting format that is maybe for the more casual fan. How do you, once you got them in the door, be like, here's something to actually dig into. Here's something that might inform the way you watch the game, give you something else to think about, give you something to spout off to your buddy when you're on a bar stool with them, like whatever. Put something in there worth your time. If what we know from audience retention behavior, whatever, is they're going to click on it more if it says that. Give them something that's good for them when they get in there and see if they'll dig it. And I am not, again, I don't have enough ego to think that like I am necessarily the best chef in that capacity, but I can roast the Brussels sprouts a little bit. I think I know how to do that. So I think that's finding the balance and finding the best way to present all those things. It's going to be a constantly moving target. It's also worth noting that we are talking about my lengthy career at Yahoo Sports and the Ringer, and then back at Yahoo Sports. And we're not talking about me being next to Stephen A. Smith or whatever. I don't know that I'm not necessarily, I haven't evolved or reached that point where it's like you get to that breakthrough level. I hope somebody really good and really smart at it does, because I think it'll help everybody understand the game better and maybe get more dig into it a little bit better. But in the meantime, in the position that I got, in the opportunity that I got, I feel like it's my job to do that. And I think the more of us that do that, and the smarter that people like me are going to be, and the smarter that we're all going to be about it, and maybe the more fun we can have with it too.
Hey, I mean, you're right on that list with all the people you shouted out, and we're not trying to take out all of media. I think this hits on,
Please don't take out all of media. Not only, at least until I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. We got to get them through college, then you can take out all of media.
Then we take them out after that. And I think we're hitting on a little bit of what like the big LeBron quote was the other day, like the face of the league, and why would you want to be the face of the league if all the media does is tear you down. But I think even he acknowledged that it's not everybody. It's a handful of loud voices on the biggest platforms that also are probably incentivized to say outrageous things for the Twitter verse click type of clickbait that will follow. And I think there is a big difference between what you're describing in terms of like the title that is more likely to draw in clicks, and something like the taboo of clickbait, where
Sure.
I think if you follow through with the title and you follow through and actually provide evidence like you are doing with, stats, film, quotes, showing here are what I believe in to be true, and this is just kind of the title we landed on, like that to me is simply what has to be done to put out an article to get seen. And that's different than saying here's the winners and losers, and it's just because Luke is good and the other team's dumb. And like
Right.
or there's nothing in there, there's no meat to the bone on there. Like I think those are different when you put in a lot of work. And on that process, one kind of last idea before we dive into some of the actual basketball here is, and you already hit on it a little bit, but you know, I would love to hear about your process in all of this, coming up with stories, whether it's your writing process on story topics, whether you're watching film, you see something, you go to the stats, it confirms it, and then you start an article, or maybe it's the opposite where you have an idea, you start writing, you look it up, and then you find the film that kind of matches up with it. I would love to hear, how
Hmm.
you come up with the stories, and that can kind of double with the podcast. You host this relatively new podcast, The Big Number, with Tom and Haberstroh, and would love to. A recent episode you talked about, like, is this the best Cavs team ever?
Yep.
Which is super interesting because the record and the point differential would lean those ways, and then the average fan will be like, "Well, LeBron played there a few times. Maybe he has some of the teams." So you could go either way there, and I'll just throw this in as kind of, not to hit you with three questions, but
That's fine.
would you, in terms of like a media career, would you feel there's any at any point where you feel like it has become relatively stable and you kind of know you have, or is it just every season is kind of a new challenge?
Mm. That's a lot in there. I'll try to go backwards. All right. So we'll start with the last one. I've been super fortunate that I've been like a staff writer at now two websites, but three stints, for more than a decade. And so that is an extraordinarily like fortunate, privileged position. I do not take that for granted. I'm not like, and I'm not, contract year to year. I'm a staff guy. So like, I don't I have the same level of dread at the end of every season or the over the off season as everybody. Like, I hope I get to go do this again next year. But generally, I don't like. I'm not like, oh, my contract is up, so I got to figure out what's going on next. So like, I feel as much stability in this space as I think you're gonna get. Right. You know, that's, what's the old saying, like momentum's only as good as tomorrow's starting pitcher. Like, we'll see how long that persists, right? But that is how it's stability in that way, and as I've been really fortunate with that. um each season is definitely its own beast, no matter what, because no matter what you wrote, or what topics you did, what shows you did, whatever, like, it all goes away. It's all ephemeral, and you got to come up with the pitches for tomorrow. You are only as relevant or as accomplished or as whatever as your continual output and presence in the conversation. So that can be daunting, but also that it's like the fact that you are dealing with something that is always changing means that there's always something new to write about. That's like the more optimistic spin on it. There's always something new to go try to focus on. For me, in terms of idea generation, like I mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of just like at the beginning of the season, when it's like, you have to pitch like training camp ideas or season preview ideas. um I start generally with like, and like a lot of people, kind of a reintroduction to the title race. Like, this is, who are the teams that, whether it's from Vegas odds or from other sort of prediction systems or whatever, like, who are the most likely X number of teams to win the championship? Make your case for, make your case against, sort of start building out from there. And then like, well, in addition to those teams, if you've written about like 8 teams, the cases for and against why those teams are likely to be a championship contender. All right, well, outside of them, who's interesting to you? Why are they interesting to you? Maybe you can write a series called something like the 5 most interesting teams in the NBA this season, and you can then get up to 13 or 14 teams that you've just written about before we even get into training camp. So that starts from there. And then once you get to the season, it's like, all right, is there, or, just from watching a ton of games, you're like, who's popping off the screen to me at the beginning of the season? Is this guy doing something different than he used to? This team has a new coach or they're like trying something new out. I love Ben Taylor, Thinking Basketball, the video that he did earlier this season on the Grizzlies' new offense, because I was aware that the Grizzlies were trying to change their offensive structure. I was aware that they made a bunch of hires about that, and they were like fundamentally reorganizing the way things work. And I would watch him and be like, I know it's different, but I'm not sure how. And then he cracked it wide open, was like, this is how it works. And then you're like, oh, of course, now I understand it. And that's what I think everybody's chasing after in these sorts of projects that you do. Like the glint of recognition in somebody's eye when you can see that they get what you're talking about. That's the best thing in the world. Like, it's the best thing in the world conversationally. It's the best thing in the world in communicating an idea, when you can kind of get it through to somebody. And that's it, the momentary high of that is what keeps you kind of coming back to do more of it. So once you're actually in the flow of the season and you've written about those 5 favorites or 8 favorites, and then 5 other interesting teams to you, and this, 4 other players that have started off the season hot or whatever, it's a little bit more of a grind. And you're like, all right, cleaning the glass is a very helpful resource, because it has like, over the last 2 weeks, here's what these teams have been doing, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, now is that just noise? Did they hit a rough spot in the schedule? Did they play a bunch of teams that didn't have their best player on them? Why is that team doing X, Y, or Z thing? Well, you can sort that also, those sorts of things also for like, who's having the biggest on-court, off-court splits, where you're like, why are they playing that much better with that guy on the court? Let me dig into the film on that. Let me dig into the numbers on that. And sometimes those things lead you down blind alleys, and you get to like, you've been staring at numbers for an hour, and then you're like, I actually don't understand this. I don't know why this is happening, and I'm not sure it's interesting. So maybe I have to like put that away for a while and try something else. But generally speaking, I feel like at this point, I kind of trust that craft, that like the workflow of, if I see something and I'm like, that number seems, I'm surprised by that, or I'm watching on film and you're like, that guy, a few years ago, it was like, I think it was Lonzo. And I was like, that guy throws more hit ahead passes than like anybody I've ever seen. And then you're like, you find some way to go look into that. And you're like, oh, that actually is a thing. Or like my former coworker, Haley O'Shaughnessy, when I was at the Ringer, she was like, it really seems like Lonzo hits Zion all the time. Like the specific, like him passing to him it's really, then you like look at assist combinations. You look at, there's all these different ways you can kind of generate a germ of an idea. And sometimes those ideas are like, that's worth a standalone piece on its own. And sometimes it's, maybe that's not its own thing, but it can be part of, a roundup of 3 or 4 teams. There's all ways to kind of like prepare it all and put it all together. So all of that is a long-winded way of saying it is a constant watching. You're watching games every night as much as you can, at least a couple of games, and or bouncing around. It is every day digging into numbers, every day reading as much as I can. I used to do something, I took over a feature at Ball Don't Lie years ago called the 10-man rotation, which was a thing that I think Kelly Dwyer started doing it. And it was basically like a list of links. The other sites had their own versions of it. True Hoop had the bullets. The point forward was Zach Lowe before you got to Grantland. He was at SI. Then Rob Mahoney took that over, and Ben Golliver took that over. But these list of links, and 10-man rotation was Yahoo's version of that. And to fill out 10 links every day, you had to do a hell of a lot of reading, newspapers and magazines and blogs, and like try to be up on team blogs and what independent people were writing. And now that's, I guess, more like people's newsletters and Substacks and things like that. But trying to be more, and I guess also people just don't really blog because there's a lot more social media conversation. In any event, you need to try to be up as much as you can on what other people are saying too. So you're not just like restating it, or if they are writing something particularly interesting and cool that you like, share it, because that's the only way any of us find out about each other. It's the way that good work gets disseminated when you actually distribute it. So all of which is to say, I try to not cheat the work, right? Like I'm my job, the way I do it, I'm not traveling across the country in gyms all the time. I have 2 small kids. I'm the I'm here for school pickup every day, cooking dinner at night, doing homework with them. So I'm couch and computer is most of what my gig is. So if I'm doing that and I'm not like in the gym with the scouts every day, I got to make sure I'm doing my work in other ways. And that process and that practice has stayed pretty consistent for a number of years now.
Yeah, it sounds like you gotta, stay on top of it. You gotta stay aware of what the basketball world is talking about. And the point that came across to me is that you might not come up with a eureka moment that's gonna like no one else can ever think of, but just be interesting and try to show why something is interesting, and you kind of have a good feel for if it's interesting to you, it's probably interesting to other people that cover basketball and want to learn about basketball. And like you said, if it's not being talked about already, then there's an opportunity to maybe not be the first on the entire idea, but at least the first to cover it and give it a good, a paragraph or a full article, and depending on the topic there. And the Lonzo thing is interesting. At first, it reminded me of just watching these highlights with Luka and LeBron, just basically hitting the receiver, going full court at any chance they get. That sounds like
Yes.
a match made in heaven, kind of like that Lonzo Zion parallel from earlier, and reminds me of something I wrote on LaMelo Ball, and also, first of all, reminds me of how they played at Chino Hills, the Ball brothers. Like
Yep.
they were just constantly pushing the pace, outlets, trying to hit ahead to the big. I think it was Onyeka Okongwu back then
Yeah, that's right.
on their team, that they were just like running the floor, like constantly looking for look ahead. So I think that style of play is ingrained all the way back to high school for the Ball brothers, and then you see it play out in the NBA. And I wrote something on LaMelo Ball comparing it. He would do this thing that Pistol Pete would also do, that I read about in something called The Physics of Basketball, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fully dive into the topic, but just the idea that the quickest, or the way to get the ball furthest up the court while expending the least amount of energy is by throwing one of these like crazy passes from your hip, where
Yeah,
it's like
those underhand scoop. Yeah.
as you can see here, like the underhand scoop pass where you put a little bit on that backspin touch, like a Magic Johnson would, where he gets the bounce perfect, like all those things. But it's just super interesting to kind of dive into, like, LaMelo has done this more than once. It's not like he just got lucky on one pass. Like he's looking to throw it ahead. So let's dive into how that works, and maybe learn something a little bit and connect it to a lesson of how it could work for anyone that wants to become an outlet passer but might not have the strength to throw it full court the right way, or whatever it may be. So just try to like be interesting and slightly different enough to write about that interesting topic is really my takeaway from there.
Yeah, I mean, so listen, I am not, you're just going to shock you. I'm not a high level basketball player, never have been a high level basketball player. Was not, and like, am not, there are, you're talking about learning the game. Like there are people who like, my former colleague, the dearly departed Jonathan Sharks, he watched and he got things immediately. He saw something, he would watch the game and be able to like instantly sort of map what the strategies were, what the tactics were, why something worked, why something didn't work, and he was very quick with the way he analyzed things, saw things in ways that I don't see. So for me, I got to watch a lot. I got to like work at the trying to learn it more, and like I don't process the game like a scout. I don't process the game like a coach, and so I can't promise a reader or a listener that I'm going to give you that. What I have is the willingness to try, like work super hard to uncover something that I think is interesting, whether that's a number, whether that's a film clip, whether that's, something that somebody else read that I can apply in context to something broader. And I've got my voice. That's the only thing I got that no one else has. And so to your point about like, make it interesting, that is the goal every day. Every time I stare at that blank Google Doc, every time Tom says, here's what I want to talk about this week. And then my job. So going back to the podcast, Tom Haberstroh and I do a show called The Big Number. And Tom is, he's been doing this as a video series going back to when he was at ESPN, has done it. It's his franchise, his sort of big idea that he does such a wonderful job with, and was kind enough when he wanted to expand it out into a show to ask me if I would, be on board with it. And so Tom sets the big number. We're going to do this week. And then my job is to come up with 4 little numbers that either support it or deepen it, sometimes contradict it, sometimes add like this is our other question that might spin off of it, contextualize it within the league, whatever, but 4 things that are real sort of offshoots of it. And the only way I'm going to do that is by studying and looking things up and working hard and trying to come up with something that not only is like a cool number, but also can lead to a few minutes of conversation. And so, yeah, again, like what I've got is the prism through which I process all that stuff and also the willingness to just grind at it. And if you've got those 2 things and I've been fortunate enough to be able to develop a lot of reps in terms of figuring out what my voice is just on the page. And then increasingly the last couple of years on the microphone, the more opportunities you take to do that, the more reps you give yourself on those things, and the more you sort of refine your own sense of what's interesting to you and your ability to communicate that to other people, I think the more successful you're going to be at those things. But I wish there was a shortcut to it. It's taken me 15 years to get to this point, and so we'll see, how successful I am at it. Reasonable people can argue over that, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's, and I think whether you are talking about it from a scouting perspective or a coaching perspective or a playing perspective, I think the answer that you get from a lot of people is like the reps are everything. There's no shortcut to whatever the thing is. There's no shortcut to that. You gotta put the reps in to get the product on the other end.
Absolutely. I mean, it's super interesting process, and I mean, we've been diving into it for 40 minutes already. I'd love to
Wow, I'm
dive
sorry.
into.
I'm yammering. I apologize.
No, this is the place to do it. We're on the Learning Basketball podcast. I want to learn about basketball media and just all. I want to learn about your path and your journey, your perspective, and I appreciate you sharing it. I think we've hit on a ton of cool things, and now I'd love to dive into a handful of your stories as well. You've written recently on 2 big topics that I would love to hit on, which is, let's go with Jamal Murray first. But
Okay.
Jamal Murray is back. Like he is full blown back. Like you wrote a great piece, and I won't, steal all of your numbers or anything that from that piece. I'll let you share some of those. But if you go back to basically December 8th is the big cutoff that the coach also wants to point out that's the big before and after. Like go back and look up the stats for the Nuggets for Jamal before and after December 8th, and they're just unreal. And just to hit on a handful of them, there was a 15 game stretch after December 8th, where Jamal was putting up 21 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 48, 40, and 92. And it's not too different from his actual season average now on the whole. But he's, one of the best careers in transition, and one of the career's best seasons of Jamal's career in transition, off cuts, off ball, off screens. And part of that might be Jamal coming back and finally returning from injury, which, I'm sure is part of it.
Yeah.
And another part could be Russell Westbrook just meshing so great, both with Jokic and with Jamal, kind of creating some off-ball looks for a guy that normally gets all of his looks with very little space coming off a Jokic screen, and then pulling up for, an elbow midi pull-up fadeaway bump and finish that he just drilled because he's an insane tough shot maker. And, Jamal, like you look at his stats, he's actually got a career high in points per game this year, even if it's by a small margin. Like his true shooting percentage, his assists are all right up there for anything in his career. And one last one before we get to some of your stats is that he just dropped a 55-point career high against the Blazers. Like he's back. At Kierthika, you tweeted out that that's Jamal's sixth 40. Sorry, he has 6 career 40-point games. And that's the third most of any Canadian behind Shea and Wiggins. And that's actually the individual highest point total of any Canadian is the 55-point game that he dropped. So, shout out Canada. Big redemption coming off of kind of his rough summer with Canada, where a lot of these injuries and kind of the fans kind of saw he wasn't himself is what the vibe was. But, can you dive in a little bit to some of these numbers, especially before and after that date, of how much Jamal is back between the pull-up shooting and Denver's success? So I'll throw one last stat is that since that date, they're 28-12. They're the third best record in the league, third in point differential, second best offense in the league. I mean, the Nuggets are back.
Yeah, the thing that was like the sort of tipped me there was, and then of course the fact that he scored 55 was like a nice news peg for it. But I had pitched it. This is one of those things where like I reached out to my editor as that game was happening, and I was like, so that pitch I had from like a couple weeks ago, like I can like microwave that in the morning if you want. He's like, yeah, totally, let's go do that. But it was that I think it was, I don't know if it was that 15 game stretch, but a similar stretch that you're talking about where it's like, all right, it's like 21, 6-4. The shooting splits are back up. And I was like, that like, I just sort of saw that span. I was like, that looks familiar. Why does that kind of like those specific numbers look familiar? And I was like, what was it like? Where was he at before he got hurt, before he tore up his knee? Because I remember when he tore up his knee, writing a story about like, right before that was when they made the Aaron Gordon trade. And I was like, I had written a story that was like this, it's happening now. Like it's only 5 or 6 games, but like this guy unlocked the team and the team unlocked him.
Stretch, man.
Yeah. And I'm like, so I remember writing that. And then when he got hurt, writing a reaction story about that. And I'm like, so these numbers sounded familiar to me. And oh, wait, what he's averaging in this whatever stretch is what he was averaging for that team that looked like a championship favorite before he got hurt. What did he average when he got back healthy that like last half season when the minutes restriction came off? It's almost exactly these numbers. Huh. What was he averaging last year before he hurt his ankle at the end of the season? And then he went into that tailspin into the playoffs and into the team set. It was almost exactly this. I'm like, all right. So if that's true, and he's looking in this structure like productive at basically the same level as he was when they were a title contender before he got hurt, when they won the title after he got healthy, and when they looked like the best team in the West when they were vying for the 1 seed before he got hurt last year, like then we have to consider them a contender, or at least be aware that it could be happening. And also it was worth pointing out to me in that moment, I'm like, I think a lot of people maybe lose track of everything that is the Nuggets that's not Jokic, where you're like, I mean, and understandably so, he certainly gives you a lot to pay attention to. But I think when you anchor to a take or to an understanding of something early in a season, it can be difficult to move off of it. And so at the beginning of the season, we had just seen him not shoot well in the playoffs. We had just seen him not shoot well, not play well for Canada. He didn't really look all that great at the beginning of the season. So then when there is an like actual tangible evidence and you can point to it and say, again, I had those numbers and that division of labor before and after December 8th in the pitch to my editor. And then Michael Malone comes out and is like, it's really a bit night and day before and after December 8th. And I was like, thank you, coach, for putting the exact quote in that can like just drop right in there. You don't always get lucky with that, but where like it is worth demonstrating and showing to people, this is why. Like this is happening, and there's something that is different now than it used to be, and we can look at how it's changed, and we can look at why that matters, and we can contextualize that in the structure of this team, and the structure of the West, and the structure of the championship change, and like all those things, they all go together, and it's all one. It is a small story of one player and one 15-game stretch that is also like a story of the league. And when you can do that, those things are an awful lot of fun to work on. And, I don't have specific catch and shoot numbers or anything like that are any better than the stuff that you just said. But I will say that's why I wanted to write about that. And it's why as long as he stays healthy and why it seems like the burst is back, the finishing in the lane is back, the drive numbers are up, all that kind of stuff. If that remains true, then they are as dangerous as they have been the last couple of years, because the big guy's not changing anything. That's, I know, you know what you're getting from him, and what you're getting from him is extremely dangerous. So if you get one other guy that is operating at that level, and every time they've had Murray at that level, they've been a threat. The defense is another question, and that's, the more like they're going to need Aaron Gordon that is close to full strength as possible. They're going to need Peyton Watson. They're going to need Russ to freelance a little bit less in those moments. They're going to need a lot, but you get those two, you get Jokic and Murray at the level that they've been at for the last 3 months, and you could be off and running.
Yeah, the defense is a good question mark. I mean, the most contenders, I always go back to the stat that are top 12 on both ends of the floor
Yeah.
via offensive defensive rating since Shaq and Kobe. And right now they're 19th. And even in this, great stretch, they're 21st defense, but they're still winning games. Their third best record. I remember for a while they had one of the best records while being also one of the worst 3-point shooting teams. And they
Yeah.
might still, be kind of living up to that. And, some of the splits, just to keep diving into some of those numbers, like you mentioned in the article, before December 8th, it was only 18 points a game for Jamal on 42, 33, 80 with a 12-10 record for the team. And they were beating teams by 2.7 points per 100 possessions. And since December 8th, he's up to all these splits that we're talking about: 23 points a
Right.
game, 50, 40, 92, dropping 6 assists and 4 dimes, or 4 assists and 6 assists, 4 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game, with a 24-9 record, while the Nuggets are beating teams by 8.3. The best record in February. The second best record in the West in net rating since that date. I like the set as well. One of 34 players with 50 pull-up threes, similar efficiency to Dame and Kyrie.
Yeah.
According to Automatic NBA, Jamal Murray is the 15th best shooter in the NBA this year when you add up all the points added from pull-up threes, catch and shoot threes,
Right.
free throws, and long twos. Just one of the best shooters, period, in the whole team. And the conversation reminds me a little bit of the Tyrese Halliburton conversation, where you go a few months of what happened to the star I knew. Like, where is this guy? Like,
Right.
it is funny how quick the NBA talking points can become. What have you done for me lately? And not as much, what have you shown me over the last 3 to 5 years of your career, that kind of like carve out a little bit of benefit of the doubt with what you're going through. It's like, we know what player he can be. He's clearly not himself, whatever the factor is. Did something change within his body? Did something change within the situation, the context of the team? And, what can anyone do to fix those things? And maybe it was as simple as just kind of getting his feet back under him and legs back under him from that injury, which a lot of guys go through and can take a long time to really recover and get back to yourself. And now you look at the Pacers, they're surging in the East with Tyrese Halliburton after a rough start. His numbers are back to normal, and maybe, sample size kind of comes to in the end, where like you give guys enough of a sample size to actually like build out their entire season. Sometimes you just have a bad 20 game stretch. Maybe it's half a season, but when you look at especially multi-year samples, they tend to get, unless their career is over, they tend to kind of regress to the mean, whether it's
Sure.
good or bad, whether it's lights out shooting or just missing shots or whatever it may be. So super interesting to see kind of how far they can go, because that experience is bar none. I mean, they won it all with this group. Aaron Gordon's back and healthy. Westbrook has been a plus for this team after
Absolutely.
being something of, a misfit everywhere else that he's gone, just not totally aligned. Like, it's a match made in heaven. His burst running off of a Jokic handoff, and that transition that we talked about earlier, how Russ looks to push the pace, and it's getting easier looks for himself off of Jokic passes. Jamal in transition is the best or one of the best in his career, putting him off the ball a little bit. Like, it's just worked for a lot of reasons there offensively. And so it's going to come to like a clash of styles in the playoffs. Will this offense be able to just out experience and outthink and out process some of these tough defenses, especially in the West, like Oklahoma City and Houston? And I think this dives into a little bit of your other article when it comes to the Bucks and Giannis. And the idea that essentially it feels like Giannis is chasing his own ghost, that he has shown like the peak of his powers looks one way as a defensive player of the year candidate, point forward, point center that can put up 30, 10, and 8 with ease and always fill up the box score. And it's like, if the Bucks don't win 60 games and Giannis doesn't have these numbers that he showed us before, he must not actually be his MVP prime level self. And then you go and look at his numbers, and they're basically as good as they've ever been. But the team isn't winning quite as much. And he even had a quote about this in the story, that it just feels like he might not ever win an MVP again because of the way that voters either grow a little fatigue, or they just look at him differently, because you set the bar at a certain point, and if you don't hit that personal bar, then it's almost as if you're worse than your normal self, even though you're basically just as good as ever. So it's I think it ties together because the three MVP candidates seem to be Jokic and Shea, and then Giannis kind of lurking as this monster putting up the numbers, but the wins don't quite add up. When if you look at some of the, whether it's individual or as a team, like Giannis is sixth in the entire NBA in dunks and threes, estimated plus minus,
Yep.
but Jokic and Shea are 1 and 2, and
Yeah.
by quite a wide margin as well. The Bucks are 15th in point differential on the season, 11th offense, 13th defense. That's basically right on the edge of a contender level offense and defense, and you have a superstar and other co-stars in place. Like, you can buy them as a sleeper type of contender with those numbers, but then the Nuggets and Thunder are just better basically at both sides, except for the Nuggets on defense. The Nuggets are sixth point differential, second on offense, 19th defense,
Yeah.
while the Thunder are first point differential, fourth on offense, and first on defense. And the Nuggets are even better since that date we mentioned, since 12-8. They're third in the whole league in PD and second on offense. So I think it ties together in the fact that Giannis will not catch them on wins and team stats on point differential, but individual impact, he really is right up there with anyone in the NBA. So, I guess the question would be, do you think Giannis could win another MVP in his career, even if his team might not reach those same heights with Coach Bud of, we're just a walking 60-win team every single year because we have Giannis and these four-factor principles in place that we're going to rely on to get that record? Like, is Giannis done winning MVP, or do you think, the tables can turn again and maybe he can eke one more out because he's playing like an MVP?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's done. I think that the impetus for me doing that story was that I was like, wait a second, Giannis is averaging 30, 10, and 5 and shooting 60% from the floor. What? And then I was like, how often has that happened? Oh, he's the only player who's ever done that, and he's doing it for the second year in a row. What? And then it's like, why? Like, and then I have to then from that point go like, why am I only realizing this now? Like, have I missed a whole lot of coverage of this? And the answer was like, not really. I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. And trying to contextualize it. And it's like, so I think that there's a few different things about it. One thing that I found out from Bucks fans was that their main, or a number of Bucks fans at least, is that their main explanation for why Giannis might be done winning MVPs, or why there hasn't been enough focus on it, is that the media, capital T, capital M, the media, wants Giannis out of Milwaukee because they want him in a bigger market, because that's better for ratings and clicks and, listenings and streams and whatever. Which goes back to, I think, our earlier conversation about like what TM the media is and who constitutes it, and stuff like that. So that there's that part. But there's also, like, if you are a 4 seed, 5 seed, 6 seed ish, there's also the anchor problem of they started the season 2-8 and people would sort of wrote them off as a serious team pretty early. There's the not at all related to an individual regular season award, but like, we haven't seen Giannis have a big playoff moment in 4 years, right? Like, or since that Celtics series. We have, in the absence of him in those big moments, Jokic has risen and Shea has risen and other players have risen along with it. Another fun offshoot of that was a Celtics fan asking me why I did not write the exact same article about Jason Tatum, to which I can only say I wrote, is this Jason Tatum's MVP year, like 3 months ago? And, and I'm pretty sure at least one of my other colleagues was writing a Jason Tatum face of the NBA thing also this week. So like, we can't all write the same thing all the time in any event. That said, like, so you have the out of sight, out of mind in terms of title contention. You have out of sight, out of mind in terms of postseason, performance. You have the sheer fact of other guys, as you mentioned, like rising up above. Like, Shea is leading the NBA in scoring. Jokic is is averaging a triple double, and almost a 30-10-10 triple double on like I don't know, like 700 true shooting or whatever it is. The advanced numbers, like Giannis is top 3, top 5, top 7, top whatever, but he's not top 1 or top 2 in almost all of them. And so you wind up with these things where it's like, this guy, as incredible as it is, and as historic as it is, you are now forced to, like, it's like Godzilla versus Kong or something like that. You are forced to do battle with other guys also doing the historic things where it's like, all right, well, Shea is putting up legitimate, like, prime Jordan numbers on Steph shooting efficiency for a team that has the highest margin of victory in NBA history. Tough to knock that guy off, right? You know, like, Jokic is having arguably the best individual statistical season in the history of the league on a team that is, like, vying for the 2 seed, that is, like, that has been, like, functionally and, like, overwhelmingly better top to bottom than the Bucks, despite the Bucks having, you know, 2 all-star, or having an all-star with them, and, you know, the, like, all that kind of stuff. So it in any event, that was interesting to me. Like, why does Giannis recede? And, like, is it worth pulling at some of those threads? Like, why aren't we having that conversation all the time? Why are we not just every day being like, this guy's doing something no one's ever done? It's insane. All the time. It's nuts. Why are we not talking about it? And it's like, well, here are some of the reasons why we're not talking about it. And also, that was leading into a game where he was about to play Jokic on national TV. And it's like, well, if you want to make a case, this would be a good time to do it. And then he did what, 28, 19, and 7, and they won. And the conversation went away right away. It didn't persist. And so maybe everybody that was saying it's because of the market thing and it's the capital T, capital M media, maybe they were right. I don't know. But that's an example of, I look and I see a number, or I see some numbers, and I go, huh. And that makes me want to look into it more. And then I look into it more and I'm like, there is something here. What is this? And then you say, there's a narrative component to this. There is a contextual component with other stars. There's a contextual component with the team. There's a contextual component in the title race. And, like, once I start putting all that stuff together and throwing all those ingredients into the pot, I'm like, all right, I can cook something with this. Like, there's something that is worth reading to this. And then my editors say, oh yeah, there's also a national TV game Thursday. Write it for them. And you're like, great. All right, we did it. You know, and then as soon as it's done, you're like, now I got to go find the next one. I got to find the next set of ingredients. But to me, that's what I mean, I hope it comes across. Like, I get geeked out about this stuff. I think it's fun. I think it's interesting. I think there's, like, stuff to actually dig into and enjoy about all of it. And if I can communicate that in the writing, in the talking, in the whatever, then you know, ideally people will kind of come along for the ride with it. And maybe not everybody for all 2,000 words every time. You know, I get it. Like, there's a lot that I'm dropping on people when I do these things, and I should probably edit myself more tightly, and my editor should probably edit me more tightly. But hopefully, I'm putting some things in there that are worth worth enjoying along the way, because I'm certainly having a good time doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that always makes it more interesting when you're interested in it, and when you find it, you know, if you find it interesting, someone else probably will too, and especially like we hit on before, like, that's kind of what you're carving out, and that taste for interesting, you know, basketball knowledge. So I can see how that process works, and it works out when, you know, a national game is about to drop right as the story is also being published. I mean,
It's
you
nice when
always
it
want
lines
to
up. Yeah.
time it in, because it's really underrated how how much the timing of some of these articles really matters, just to get any eyeballs on it, because you can have the same idea, the same premise at any point in the season, but if it's not kind of arriving at the same time as, you know, when that person is on center stage, it can sometimes get lost in the shuffle. And, you know, the live sports are often like live for a reason. Like, people are interested in the liveness of it all and what just happened, as much as the long-term themes of the season at times. So it's definitely a challenge to kind of correlate these ideas, these stories, with what's actually happening on the court as it's happening, and trying to get it out as soon as it happens. And,
Yeah.
you know, I can see the Bucks side of things, you know, for a lot of reasons that you hit on, and also just like the expectations of their season in general, like the idea that they're the ones that won the Dame trade, so they should just be magically great because they paired Dame and Giannis, and they weren't overnight. It was almost a step back. And now it took, like you said, I think it was a 2-8 start. Like it was a
Yep.
slow start for the season. You bring in a Doc Rivers, like the expectations now are championship or bust when you do some of these types of moves, if they weren't that already. But
Yep.
now they very much are. Like you don't have an excuse. You have the co-star, you have the coach that is is known for like bringing stars together and meshing personalities. And in my eyes, it should have always, like, I'm surprised it didn't, not that it didn't just work overnight, but that the pick and roll element of it was not
Yeah.
really dominant really quickly. But they are getting up there now. Like at the time, like back in the day, like around the time of the bubble, there were three most efficient plays in the league were James Harden isos, but also Damian Lillard pick and rolls and Giannis pick and roll as the roll man. And
Yep.
the natural pairing is like, well, if they just ran that pick and roll together, that would be unstoppable. And it wasn't at first, but now this season, Dame's pick and roll ball handler PPP, including passes, is in the 89th percentile on a really high volume at 1.1 points per possession. And Giannis is a solid 1.14 points per possession as the roll man as well. And so you can kind of feel like that really is clicking a little bit and it's coming together. And it's just, it's basketball. There is a little volatility to it. Like there
Sure.
is a little up and down to the results. And you know a lot of us like now expect perfection or expect the Warriors for when something goes right. Like they set the bar, and it's not everyone can be the greatest team of all time.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that point. So two things. One, there, it's the reps again, right? Like, yes, it makes sense when you look at it and say, out of the box, Dame and Giannis, that fits. That's peanut butter and jelly, man. That's going to work together no matter what. I feel like a lot of food metaphors today. Maybe I should have had lunch before we started. But that idea of like these guys are gonna fit perfectly. But uh, Giannis had years of reps with Drew as the ball handler. He'd had years of reps with Chris as the ball handler. He just didn't have that familiarity with Dame, and it took a while. It takes time. And now, obviously, one answer to that is like, well, do it all the time, and then you will get those reps faster. But it takes time to develop that chemistry and to develop that comfort. And I remember I caught them at the beginning of last season when they were in Brooklyn, and they were it was right after Middleton had sort of come back and was in, and saying like it felt more natural for Giannis to be able to go set with Middleton and then have Dame spot up, but then that did not feel natural for Dame, and so like there was a lot to figure out. And injuries obviously complicated that dramatically and have left the Bucks where they are now with Kyle Kuzma instead of Chris Middleton. But so that's one side of it. But the point that you made about we expect the Warriors, I think that is like, I don't even know if this is a hot take or not, but I think that is like one of the lasting legacies of that team. I think that team broke the brains of all of us in terms of how we watch basketball teams. For the history of basketball, it wasn't can you build the perfect team? It was how do teams match up against one another, right? Styles make fights. Can this team, exploit that team's weaknesses? Can that team, defend enough, ward off its own weaknesses, paper over its own weaknesses enough to take advantage of that other team? And then the Warriors happened, and it was like, I remember my former coworker Eric Friedman was like, they got Kevin Durant as like in case of emergency break glass. Like if a team was able to fix all the other problems, it's like, well, Kevin Durant's just going to run the shoot the ball over you play and be able to score no matter what. And then that solved things, and then the game, it fundamentally changed the way teams were built, and it fundamentally changed the way we evaluated teams. I think if that team's not perfect, then screw them. And that's like, there's no, I think now, I mean, I guess Oklahoma City is about as close to a complete thing as you could ask for in the game as it exists right now. But, or maybe Boston was that last year too. But I think where we are now is a little bit more. It's going to be styles make fights. This is a matchup based sport. Yeah, the Lakers aren't going to be playing with a center that's better than Jackson Hayes, but try to figure out, like, have fun dealing with Luka and LeBron in a 7-game series, right? Or dealing with the fact they can throw out like 5, 6, 8 power, combo forwards and like play out of that for 48 minutes in a playoff game. There's the Dame Giannis. Like you might be a higher seed in the East, But if you got to see Giannis for 7 games, you're probably not feeling too great about that. Like I think we are maybe reestablishing an equilibrium that's like, there is no, it's not, it's the line from Good Will Hunting. Like there's no, like, she's not perfect and you're not either, but it's whether you're perfect for each other. Like, can the team find the right chemistry? Can the team develop its strengths well enough to be able to exploit your weaknesses? Like, I think a couple of years ago, that Cavs team was probably better than that first year Brunson or second year Brunson Knicks, but the Knicks' ability to hammer the offensive glass was the weakness that the Cavs could not overcome. And the Cavs didn't have enough shooting to be able to shoot the Knicks out of pack in the paint. And then so after 2 more years, teams evolve, right? And like, so the Cavs now are like, we have shooters everywhere and our bigs are are better rebounders now. And the Knicks are like, yeah, well, we play 5 out with Cat. So we're going to like, like, and it's all, and now obviously that hasn't worked for the Knicks against the Cavs, but it all evolves and it's all, we're trying to solve problems. I don't know. That's the fun stuff, man. How do they do it? Are they going to be effective at it? Are they not going to be effective at it? Why will it work? Why will it not? That's the fun stuff to me. As much fun as, is LeBron going to be able to get one more? Is Luka handing the reins to Luka? Is Jimmy the missing piece? Is where does KD go this summer? Like, all that stuff's interesting too. But the part where you're like 48 minutes, 7 games when it matters the most, how do you solve that? I mean, if you're not here for that, then what are you here for?
Right, hitting the nail on the head. That clash of styles is just what makes basketball like at its most interesting. Really, like it would in theory be a lot more boring if both teams had no flaws and everyone was
Right.
just playing perfect 5-out versatile basketball. Like the sport had been solved. Like it's okay when it seems like it happens for 1 year. That means a team really did an amazing job rebuilding. But like if that was just the new norm, then people wouldn't necessarily find it as entertaining. And
Yeah.
like you hit on some of the teams, like the Cavs have one of the best offenses ever, and it's
Yeah.
just hard to kind of wrap your mind around it coming off of the years of watching those Warriors teams and the credit that they get. So that comes back to like there is no perfect basketball team normally, and it's okay to like have a few flaws. A lot of teams do have strengths and weaknesses, and it comes down to those matchups. And sometimes that's what's cool about the playoffs is you get all these adjustments, and then there's no more adjustments to make. It's just like we're good at this and they're good at that, and something's got to give. And like being able to see that play out is what makes basketball fun. And we have 7 games to kind of decide who's the better team, whether it's the perfect amount or not. I don't know. I think, as you mentioned, Ben Taylor, I think when he did the math, it would be a 21 game series to actually prove who would be the better team. And so we're just
Ben, I love you, but if you extend the playoffs to 21 game series and I'm starting the season in October and I'm ending it in October, I gotta quit. I can't do the full 21 game series, but I like where your head's at, but we got to come back here. We got to come back a little bit.
You got to figure out who the real chip is. But that's just what makes it cool is
Yeah.
getting to actually see it play out. And I could end with one more kind of quick hitter question for you.
Yeah.
Just kind of how many teams do you think, let's just say, have a puncher's chance of making the NBA Finals? And there's probably about 4 or so in the East, and I know this can kind of be a lot when you go to puncher's chance, but
Right.
that just means a non-zero chance that you could see something if everything works out. A Golden State could make their way up there, or whatever it may be. And by my, I'll let you go first, but by my count, we're looking at the Bucks and Knicks versus the Celtics and Cavs in the East. Are there? I mean, it would take a lot for a Detroit or an Indiana maybe to make that jump, but they're on a hot roll recently. And then the West, I mean, I don't know how many seeds you might go to say they have just an outside chance looking in, but obviously the favorites like the Thunder and the Nuggets are a little higher up there. You got the Grizzlies lurking, the Rockets, the Lakers and Mavericks, or sorry, the Warriors. The Mavericks look like they're dealing with some injuries, so it might not work out this season in terms of that. But how many teams would you end up with puncher's chance, and maybe like who would be your pick so far or at this point in the season for who you think ultimately makes the finals?
Yeah, I think if I remember right, at the beginning of the season, I was Thunder Celtics. I don't see a reason to come off of that. I love what the Cavaliers have been. I think their willingness to stay the course and not make like a panic move off of any of the members of their core four, and then like trust in that continuity, and let's get everybody healthy. Let's get the pieces around them right. Let's get a coach that's going to be able to maximize them, make them more than the sum of their parts. I think that is one of the cooler stories in the league all the last couple of seasons. Like, we believe in this and we're going to stick to it. And then that bearing fruit for them has been so cool. I still don't know that I would pick them over Boston in a 7-game series. So I'll stick with that as my finals pick for now. I guess I would say, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'm going to say, and I feel bad about this, but I think I'm going to say 6, because I grew up a Knicks fan. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. I love the Knicks. I have a hard time seeing I mean, barring a dramatic retrofitting of what their defense looks like with Mitchell Robinson back and like great, perfect health in the second half, or down the stretch here. I think that there is signal to their struggles against the best teams in the league. I think that they are more likely the 4th or 5th best team in the league. And that's a problem when you're going to have to go through 2 of the top 3 or 4 to get where you need to go. So I don't necessarily, I think they're more gatekeeper than finals contender this year. I don't believe in anybody below them. I think in the East making it all the way up there. Maybe like, I don't know. I have a hard time with the Pacers. I have a really hard time. Like, they've been just like flat good for most of the season. You talked earlier, it's like maybe something, like somebody has a bad 20-game stretch. Maybe the answer sometimes is Andrew Nembhard was hurt and then he gets back and Tyrese Halliburton isn't dealing with like face guard double teams in the backcourt the entire game and then having to be off the ball and no one else can create. Like, the team makes sense when actually the team can play. Imagine that.
Right.
But I think I would say probably, Thunder, Celtics, Cavs. I'm maybe a little bit in the tank because I just did this Warriors story, and the way it sort of fits. Jimmy just he addresses the needs so well and fits so neatly into what they want to be defensively. Obviously, the size could be a problem in certain matchups, particularly Denver and maybe LA with just the size of their wings, but I think at full strength, if they had everybody healthy, I think they're a fascinating team there. So let's go with them. We're going to apologize to the Grizzlies. It's just it's a little shaky for me, but I love the talent there. I love the growth of Jaren Jackson Jr. I love what they've done in terms of trying to evolve and get everybody a different sort of style of approach offensively. I'm just not totally sure. I wanted them to go get one more guy at the trade deadline, and they didn't. And that's was my hope was one more big guy who could shoot, one more big wing who could shoot, and they didn't wind up coming away with them. And then the Lakers, like, listen, my big concern with the Luka AD trade was like, how are you going to defend? And the answer is like, well, I mean, small sample sizes, but like, we're going to be smaller and switch everything, and we're going to still be better defensively. Whether that maintains, I don't know. But yeah, man, those two guys in a playoff series, that seems like an awfully tall order to solve. So let's go with that. Thunder, Celtics, Cavs, Warriors, Nuggets, Lakers. Let's go 6. And then I'd love to be proven wrong, but we'll start there. And then I think that gives us a pretty good place to jump off.
Yeah, there it is. I mean, at first glance, I counted roughly like 10 that I could kind of see in, but you kind of talked me in and out of some of them there. And, the Bucks are kind of in there, and and like we said puncher's chance, so the non-zero chance that things work out. Giannis and Dame get the right matchup, and I can see what you're saying with the Knicks too. How like they're showing it against the aggregate, but against the best teams, it doesn't seem like the best matchup at the moment so far from what we've seen. Which I guess we'll see what actually happens come playoff time, but. I really liked all the moves they made over the summer. I thought they surrounded Brunson with some 5-out real stars, two-way versatility with the wings, and you got Imrob off the bench, and now Cat spreading the floor. Like, I thought Cat would take off, and I think this is one of his best years as a scorer and shooter.
Oh yeah, he's going to make All NBA first team probably, or if not first and second. Like he's been sensational. But again, it's that styles make fights thing. I know I keep yammering, but the Knicks made the self-evaluation of this build that we had, obviously also they couldn't keep Hartenstein because the Thunder were able to make the outsized offer. The Knicks were limited in what they could offer him because of the CBA. But there's like, we'd reached kind of the ceiling of this build where we were this ground and pound, we're going to win the margins of offensive rebounding and low turnover and those sorts. Like, we're going to win the possession battle, and that's how we're going to win games. If we're going to fight with the Celtics and that offense, we need an offense like that offense. And we need wings that we can throw at Tatum and Brown, right? They make that move. Totally makes sense. And then the offense, as you're saying, proof is in the pudding. They have been a top 3 offense all season long. One of the, 25 or, so most efficient offenses of the last 50 years. They've been awesome. But what they lost along the way was the ability to ground and pound. And then they go into let's have beautiful offense competitions against the Celtics and the Cavs. And those guys have more beautiful offenses than you. And so, yeah, it's you are trying to solve a problem and then perhaps created another problem. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to solve the other one. It just, it's the challenge of at the highest levels. It's always going to be a challenge. And so I'm very interested in what if Robinson is able, he's only playing 12 minutes a game since he came back. If they can ramp him up more to getting him up to 20 or so minutes a game, if they're able to get a longer look at what it looks like when he plays with Cat, I think that's an interesting curveball for them to be able to sort of develop at this point in the season. What does that mean if they do? Tibbs was like, we've been without our starting center, and you're like, oh, do you want to start him? And if you want to start him, then what happens to, one of your wings is coming off the bench. Is like, is that Josh Hart now? What's going on? So they become interesting in that way. And I would, again, selfishly, I would love to see it. But if I'm putting on my sober analyst hat, in addition to the Flatbush Brooklyn hat, then it might be like, I got to see it to believe it, I think.
Maybe a little Deuce McBride, a little more minutes for Miles.
Always more Deuce.
When in doubt.
Cannot have enough of Deuce McBride in my life.
Just maybe that's the difference. But yeah, I could see exactly what you're saying. And that clash of styles, maybe you try to plug one hole and, like you said, creates new ones that you got to try to plug as well. And it's really hard to just be good at everything on the basketball court all at once. So you try to fix one thing, and if you're giving up the personnel that got you there, then you might, like you said, have whole new problems to be dealing with on the other end. So I think those are, the right choices here. Like Cavs and Celtics are kind of above the field, and Bucks are lurking with their stars and their ratings. And then, I think the Warriors are the team to kind of give a nod in the lower half of the playoff bracket with how far they're rising, how much has changed since the deadline. And the Rockets or Grizzlies are really high rated. They won a lot of games, but definitely are the lack of experienced teams that really haven't shown it on that stage. Whereas the Thunder, took their lumps last year, got even better, and are clearly hungry for, they're one of the teams of the season between the MVP candidate, the wins, the storylines coming off of last year, and just the depth, the offseason acquisitions of Caruso and Hartenstein. Just the mastermind process going on in that team building over there by Sam Presti. And this is one of the years of their fruition where we get to kind of see it all play out. It's really theirs to lose and the Cavs to lose, but also maybe Boston kind of has their foot only halfway on the gas pedal at this point. So, we'll see if they turn it up a notch or if this is who they are. But, it might be between those three and then another handful, like we said, the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Warriors. And, I would have had a few more names on that list, but honestly, you talked me right into it. So I'm down to, I see where you're at. And mostly I just want to, appreciate you for hopping on this podcast today. I really, appreciate you taking the time, always down to talk hoops. And it's a lot of fun just, talking about the game, but also hearing about your story, learning a new perspective on what goes into the scouting, the watching, the media, the writing, just all of it. And hope, someone is able to also find your work through all this, and just, appreciate you taking the time today, Dan.
Oh, dude. Well, it's my pleasure, Ryan. Thank you so much for asking me. My goal today was to bring down the average IQ of the Learning Basketball podcast. And so I think I've accomplished that goal today. But yeah, no, listen, if people want to check out more of my work, you can find it at Yahoo Sports. You can find me on the Big Number podcast with Tom Haberstroh. You can find me on social media at Your Man Devine. If you want to get away from social media, I don't blame you. But you can find me there if you are there. The promise that I will make you is that it's a lot of little jokes, links to songs I like, and then the stuff that I read, the stuff that I write, the stuff that I read, and the stuff that I make on podcasts. So if you're looking for other things, those things are there. But yeah, no, it was my pleasure, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, he's one of the best out here doing it. You got to follow Dan's work. Been a fan for a long time. Always, always showing up and putting out interesting thoughts on your favorite team, your least favorite team, and
Everybody in between.
Yeah, as all the writers always say, they hate your favorite player and team, no matter what they're actually talking about. That's clearly what we're trying to get across. So we're overcoming that and just trying to be interesting. And I just really appreciate your process and sharing it. So thank you, Dan, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.